So we talked about Michael McKinley. Let's get into some of his testimony. The congressional committees released the deposition of former Ambassador Michael McKinley. Those transcript. He recently resigned as senior advisor to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Of his decision to step down, Ambassador McKinley told impeachment investigators, quote, "In this context, frankly, to see the emerging information on the engagement of our missions to procure negative political information for domestic purposes, combined with the failure I saw in the building to provide support for our professional cadre in a particularly trying time, I think the combination was a pretty good reason to decide enough, that I no longer had a useful role to play." McKinley said Pompeo's decision not to issue a statement in support of former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine Marie Yovanovitch following the release of the transcript of the president's July 25th phone call with the president of Ukraine contributed to McKinley's resignation. McKinley said he raised the issue with Pompeo during 3 separate conversations, but got no response. Wow. That directly contradicts what Pompeo said last month, that McKinley had never raised any concerns.
Mike McKinley served me well for a year and a half. I chose him. I had people tell me he was a great Foreign Service officer, and in fact, he served America wonderfully for 37 years. He, in fact, had the office that was just behind mine, had a door that he could walk in anytime and say whatever he wanted. You know, from the time that Ambassador Yovanovitch departed Ukraine until the time that he came to tell me that he was departing, I never heard him say a single thing about his concerns with respect to the decision.
So you were never asked to put out
Not once, George, did Ambassador McKinley say something to me during that entire time period.
And again, McKinley says he testified under oath that he went to Pompeo 3 times to discuss that. McKinley also testified that he spoke to State Department official George Kent, who felt the State Department was using bullying tactics to try to prevent him from cooperating with Congress. According to the transcript, Kent told McKinley he thought a State Department lawyer was trying to shut him up, which led Kent to write a memo detailing allegations of bullying as well as concerns over inaccuracies in a letter written by Pompeo last month accusing Congress of harassing State Department employees. McKinley said he shared Kent's memo but received no answers. So, Jonathan Lemire, I want to read one more quote from Ambassador McKinley in the deposition, the transcript that came out yesterday. Quote, "In 37 years in the Foreign Service in different parts of the globe and working on many controversial issues, working 10 years back in Washington, I had never seen that." And he's talking about the idea of using Foreign Service officers and a shadow foreign policy to dig up dirt for the President of the United States on a domestic political opponent. Pretty cut and dried, pretty clear from his testimony.
No question, and a very damaging testimony. There was using government resources and, of course, the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to run a shadow foreign policy is another example of another norm that has been shattered by this president, and one with a hollowed-out State Department that really has real-world consequences. Ambassador Taylor, let's recall, testified a few weeks ago, and we know is from his opening statement about how he would look across a bridge from Ukraine and look at Russia-backed militants there and believe that real lives were in jeopardy because the United States was not going to provide military aid to Ukraine unless it went along with the president's push to investigate a political foe, in this case Joe Biden and his family. And also, returning to the whistleblower thing, this is reminiscent of the strategy that they used during the Mueller investigation, too, where they tried to undermine the credibility of the bureaucrats, the career civil services, the so-called deep state, to try to question the integrity of the entire thing. Back then, it was the FBI agents. It was Lisa Page and Peter Strzok. Whether it was James Comey, they're trying to sell the American public that you can't trust the people running this investigation. So therefore, you shouldn't trust the facts that they find. And that's why the president searching for any sort of defense here and coming up empty and ones that can actually rebut the facts, has fixated on this whistleblower whose identity has been floated out there already in sort of conservative media outlets, who a number of people are concerned the president himself, though it would be illegal, may tweet out this identity before too long. And they're trying to have it as a rallying cry, as much as they're stuck with the idea now that, yes, he committed a quid pro quo, but a quid pro quo, maybe that's not bad. That's the new talking point from Republican senators. They're also going after the whistleblower. And in fact, last night at this rally, there were a few dozen people sitting behind the stage who had new campaign T-shirts that said, read the transcript.
Yeah.
Because they believe the transcript exonerates the president of the transcript of his call with the Ukrainian leader, even though, of course, it's that very transcript that has launched this probe and seems to very much indicate plain as day there was a quid pro quo.
It's also not a transcript. Is the other thing to point out is it says on page 1 of the non-transcript that it's not a transcript. Mike, in order to believe the president's case here that he did nothing wrong, you have to believe that Bob Mueller and Bill Taylor and Maria Yovanovitch and Michael McKinley and Lieutenant Colonel Vindman and a long list of people who've served this country for a long time under Republicans and Democrats are all lying. That they put their hand up, they sat down for a deposition and made up stories, perhaps, I don't know, getting together and thinking of what the story could be. It's all out here now. It's all out in front of us. So it defies credibility that all of these people got together to make up a lie to take down a president.
Unless you believe that the president of the United States is combating the deep state. And they are all elements of the deep state. But the transcripts that were released yesterday add a new version to this tale that we're all living through. And the version is, if yesterday's leads was the A lead, McKinley's testimony being released, and Ambassador Yovanovitch's testimony being released, if that's the A lead, the off lead of this story is Mike Pompeo.
Absolutely.
And what he's doing.
We need to keep going back to that.
And you can start with Mike Pompeo's service as director of the Central Intelligence Agency when he states adamantly that Russia tried to influence the election. And now that's gone. Now it's the Ukraine that's involved. In addition to his testimony now that it's the Ukraine that it's involved, not Russia, it's what he's doing on a daily basis to the State Department. That's the off lead.
Incredible.
That's a big story.
It is. That is coming out at some point. There's too many situations where he has been asked questions, he has refused to answer them, he has bumbled through them and stuttered through them, and the few times that he does open his mouth, it appears to be that he is lying, and that will come out. Still ahead on Morning Joe, there's brand new poll numbers out this morning under the following headline, quote, 1 year from election, Trump trails 5 potential Democratic presidential nominees by wide margins. We'll dig into what exactly that means next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.